Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a late night insight or quick hit video on a decant that I've been testing for a while. I've worn this to bed a couple times now, and I have to say, this is why I love testing perfume, because every now and then you'll kind of get something like this where you set it aside, or you just think, you know what, this isn't really for me, or I'm not going to like it as much, or, this is just Frederic Malle trying to capitalize and make money, and they're not taking perfume seriously anymore. And then you wear it and you're like, wow, this is fantastic. And this is the much maligned Synthetic Jungle. And one of my perfume god people sent me this decant. Thank you very much. And, I've said this on many videos before, but if you have sent me stuff and there's a ton of decants up there kind of waiting to be discussed on the channel, I promise you I will talk about them on the channel one day. It's just a matter of their turn coming up. And today, it's Synthetic Jungle's turn. And again, this is still an early impression. Obviously, I don't own a bottle. I haven't gone through, 50 mils of juice or anything like that. This is just kind of one of my initial impressions. It's only the second time I've had a chance to wear it on skin, but I did wear it to bed once before. So here's kind of what I get from this. Synthetic Jungle came out in 2021, and it was created by Anne Filippo. And she was actually handpicked by Frederic Malle, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But it opens up green and almost a little bit peppery on my nose. There's no pepper. Let me drop it real quick. There's no pepper, but there is a note of basil. And this very green basil tends to come across right from the get-go. Green and floral, almost sharp and abrasive even when you first spray. Actually, I was going to say I was going to do another spray, but this is a very strong fragrance. So this spray from an hour and a half ago may have to suffice. So it's peppery and it comes across kind of sharp, abrasive, almost pushy in a way, right? And also, even though I mentioned words like sharp, abrasive, pushy, almost rough, like feeling a man's face that hasn't been shaved in a while, that stubble. It almost comes across feeling like stubble. And then with that, though, there's this beauty, this underlying beauty that it's hard to throw a word in like that with those other words, abrasive, pushy, sharp, and almost like it'll cut you, right? But also beautiful at the same time. That's how it opens up to my nose whenever I smell it. And Frederic Malle mentioned in many reviews, many interviews, I should say, that he specifically chose Anne Filippo for this project because she is such an expert on plants, using plant-like notes in a fragrance. And he always wanted to make a very green fragrance that harkened back to the fragrances of the 1970s. And if you know anything about perfume history, if you've watched some of my This Year in Perfume, or even when I highlight some of the different houses where we mention vintage houses that were around in the 70s and made these very popular green fragrances like Chanel No. 19. I should have grabbed my No. 19 bottle for the video, but it is my wife's birthday today, so I just had to do a quick video here. I had to take her out for dinner, and so I'm just getting away for a quick hit video tonight. So I didn't grab the Chanel No. 19, but I did grab this. And if you know fragrances from the 1970s, like No. 19 or like Estee Lauder's Private Collection, you'll have an idea of the green kind of 70s, ode to the green 70s that Frederic Malle was thinking about whenever Synthetic Jungle was created. And so basically the description, according to the Frederic Malle website, is bright and lush, mysterious and provocative. Synthetic Jungle is a stylized landscape in Technicolor greens, an ode to cult perfumes of the 1970s. Synthetic Jungle offers a modern version of nature reimagined, is the description. It goes on to say, Filippo retained the opulent basil of the original composition, along with a recomposed bouquet of hyacinth, lily of the valley, natural jasmine, and ylang ylang oil. And you do get a beautiful floral bouquet in this. To modernize and sharpen, she then added synthetic black currant and sterolol acetate, effectively putting the bouquet through a glossy, sparkling filter Filippo simplified the chypre and leather notes, resulting in a cleaner, more streamlined accord. Finally, she added patchouli. Patchouli is the only base note that is listed, and I am a patchouli fan, so maybe it's the patchouli that really kind of pushes this one over the edge for me. But I'll tell you what, the more I have worn this, the more I've come to enjoy it. And the green notes are, obviously, this is, to me, this is kind of a dichotomy of a couple different things. Number one, those green notes, like the galbanum and the basil over here. And then over here, the more delicate floral notes, specifically the lily of the valley, but also the jasmine and ylang ylang and hyacinth and stuff like that. But hyacinth, I think, can be a very, it can be a very narcotic, almost overpowering flower. So I can tell she really carefully dosed the hyacinth here. It's just beautiful, though. So the green notes, when you smell this fragrance, the way that it smells to my nose is that it comes across as being very crunchy. So crunchy is a really good word for the green notes in this. Crunchy and acrid, almost like walking through a rainforest after the rain, and then being transported to the desert and smelling some sort of foreign, alien white flower you've never smelled before. So that's kind of the, that is the, 1-2 punch in this fragrance to my nose, is when you smell it, it comes across as, imagine closing your eyes and like strolling through a jungle landscape. Imagine strolling through the jungles that Russian Atom and Bortnikov and Ensar Oud kind of travel through to get to the Akigala tree in these wet, because remember, the oud tree, this has nothing to do with oud, but the oud tree only grows in regions where it's never cold. If it ever gets cold, the oud tree can't grow there. The Akigala tree cannot grow there. It has to have almost jungle-like conditions all the time. So it grows in places like Laos and Thailand, Cambodia, Singapore, places like that, right? Even on some parts of the Chinese border. And so there always has to be kind of this, this warmth year-round in some places. But just imagine that landscape, right? Of this kind of always tropical rainforest type feeling. And then imagine completely going to the other side of the world, to the desert, where everything is bone dry. Instead of being green, everything is kind of brown and crunchy and acrid. And sharp. Sharp is a very good word for the green notes here. And your nose is almost like whiplashed when you smell this perfume, is what makes it so interesting, because you smell one side of it, like I was mentioning, that you almost can see in your mind's eye, you can almost see the water dripping off of the big green leaves in the jungle forest, right? You can almost see the water just dripping off of it because it's so lush and moist. And then on the other hand, it whiplashes your nose into this desert climate, this dry, acrid, harsh, sharp climate. And that is the dichotomy in this fragrance. That's the contrast. Contrast always makes a great fragrance. I'm really surprised by how good this is, to be honest with you. It's beautiful, honestly. It's quite beautiful. So Frederic Malle, when I think about his fragrances, I have to admit, they've yet to let me down. I haven't smelled the new one that everyone says is shite. I haven't smelled Uncut Gem yet. But everything I've smelled from Frederic Malle so far has not let me down. The only thing that has let me down is when I've smelled reformulated versions by Estee Lauder. If I've ever smelled like an original proper Malle, almost never lets me down. And I understand this is an Estee Lauder version, but I do feel like some of his original formulas were played with by Estee Lauder, by the Estee Lauder accountants, bean counters, if you will, trying to make sure that the fragrance is maximizing their profit, let's say. And I've done some videos on some of that topic. You can look into it. You can look into it if you're interested in learning more. But I would totally wear this. I mean, this is I'm not going to say this is a masterpiece, but I will say that this could be viewed as a masterpiece at some point in the future as time goes on, depending on how this fragrance ages. This is a beautiful green fragrance. It's fantastic. I would wear it. Absolutely, I would wear this. I would have no problem wearing this. If you love green fragrances, definitely, you know, something to put on the to sniff list. So, it's the green notes almost come across, you know, and just the fragrance in general, actually, it almost comes across as like walking through a botanical garden. But the botanical garden that comes to mind, yes, you could think about a regular botanical garden, which we have some beautiful botanical gardens here in Dallas and Fort Worth. But imagine if you've ever been to places like Scottsdale, they actually have a desert botanical garden. Imagine that kind of landscape, cactuses and stuff like that. But imagine you're walking through this botanical garden, this whiplash idea of going back and forth, a normal botanical garden to a desert botanical garden. And imagine you're kind of reading the names of these plants, and you know these plants, let's say. Maybe you don't know exactly which species of plant it is. You don't know the specific genus, but you know the plant. But you look at it, and you know that the plant exists, but you have no clue what the actual scientific name of the plant is. So you read the little plaque that is set next to the plant at the botanical gardens, and usually there's some sort of fact sheet with the plant, you know, and it tells you a little bit about it and where it grows and some interesting facts about it, right? And that is what this fragrance feels like when I wear it. That is what the fragrance gives me detail-wise when I wear this scent. It's almost like reading the little plaques on the botanical garden. It's almost like, you know, you're smelling this and you're discovering or smelling these plants that you know exist, but maybe you didn't really know they could be used in this combination. It's quite beautiful. It's really enticing. And so the green notes, for some reason, start to give me this aloe-like vibe. You ever put like aloe vera on like a sun burn or something like that? They tell you to put aloe vera on it, right? It almost gives me this aloe vera type smell for some reason. But the lily of the valley note, specifically to me, and I'm no lily of the valley expert, but I do have an entire video dedicated to Muguet. You can go check that out if you're interested. It's under my playlist. If you go to my playlist, this is not a top 10. Specifically, I keep getting people that give me fantastic recommendations, but some people actually have been asking me to do videos I've already done because I've done so many videos in the last year that, you know, they just missed it or it just got buried amongst all of the content that I put out. If you're interested, go back through my old playlist. There's some great content that I put into playlists like the This Is Not a Top 10. There's over 50 videos, I think, just in that one playlist. And one of them is on Lily of the Valley specifically, so you can learn a little bit about it. It's a very interesting note, but for some reason, when I smell this, I just think that even with the modern, let's say, restrictions on what perfumers can use in a fragrance, many of the Lily of the Valley materials that made Lily of the Valley great, and we'll talk about one of the greatest Lily of the Valley fragrances of all time here in a minute, but many of those materials are banned now. And so it's very hard to make a proper Lily of the Valley note. You can't do it. And maybe it's just to my untrained nose, but I think it's one of the best Lily of the Valley fragrances in modern times that I've ever smelled, okay? That's just my opinion. I think that outside of maybe something like vintage Diorissimo, which if you can find this bottle for 25 bucks like I did, this is an absolute steal. Reference fragrance. I mean, it's not something that, you know, this is not something that I want to wear all the time. I mean, you know, this is not something that I crave for as a man. Let me tell you my scent of the day, just out of curiosity. This is the kind of stuff that I like to wear. Gianfranco Ferre for Man from 1986. This is the vintage version. This is the vintage right here. And the vintage version, just for those of you interested in vintage perfume, the vintage version has, they called this the tea bottle for obvious reasons. The glass makes it look like a tea. The newer bottles of this stuff, this was all black. So there was no there was no glass, see-through glass here. So this is the older version. But I wore this today to work, and it was absolutely spot on, perfect for an April day. Just perfect for an April day. It was, you know, citrusy. It had that Italian citrus going in the top with this leather-like vibe that kind of starts to come through. But it all, you know what it smells like to me? I've never smelled Dior's Eau Sauvage leather version. Their Eau Sauvage queer, whatever they call it. I've never smelled the leather flanker of Eau Sauvage, but it's almost like what I imagine it would smell like, because it stays true to the citrusy kind of, you know, top. A lot of citruses in here, but you get this amazing kind of leathery, mossy thing that as it dries down it dries down very leathery and mossy. But I would almost put it in the category of the citrus fragrances that I've said that I don't like over the years. So, you know, you take something like Chanel's Pour Monsieur, Eau Sauvage, those kind of citruses that seem a little bit boring to me, Capucci Pour Homme and stuff like that. It almost falls into that category, but they used what was so popular in the 80s that I love. 80s fragrances are my all-time favorite decade, as many of you who know me know. And so Gianfranco Ferre for Man, excuse me, from 1986, they used a lot of that, and they added some, you know, traditionally masculine notes like lavender, but there's this iris, this very posh iris that blends with the leather. So it's moss, woods, you know, leather, and iris with those citruses in the top. And the citruses are tangerine, bergamot, and lemon. This is the kind of fragrance, believe it or not, I want to wear in spring and summer. Just is. I know some people might think I'm crazy, but so anyways, that's the kind of stuff I like to wear as my scent of the day. It's why I went off of that on that tangent. Excuse me whilst I hydrate. This kind of stuff is more for me like a reference. You know, I treat it almost like a museum piece. You know, I'll spray it occasionally just to remind myself what it is. But it's not something I really want to wear. I don't crave Diorissimo, okay? However, Synthetic Jungle, I could totally see myself craving and wearing. There is something about this that speaks more to something I would want to wear. I still think that this is a better Lily of the Valley note, but I think I would choose to wear Synthetic Jungle over Diorissimo. It's just my personal opinion. And I think the Lily of the Valley gives it this almost, when it mixes with this, so this muguet note, okay, mixes with this beautiful dark green, crunchy foliage vibe in Synthetic Jungle. And it almost, when it mixes, it almost gives off this beautiful white floral cosmetic smell. Okay, so remember at the top when I first sprayed, when we initially started talking about the fragrance, I mentioned that it starts off very green and very peppery, right? So it starts off green and peppery and harsh. As it continues to dry down, that Lily of the Valley note almost comes across as white floral and cosmetic-y. And so when you blend those two together, you end up getting this bitter harshness that almost screams, almost roars at you. And it's contrasted with this delicate gentleness of the Lily of the Valley. So you have this bitter, acrid, harsh, synthetic, as they say. The only thing, the name is a little bit weird because I don't find this synthetic at all. Like when I first heard the name, the first thing that came to mind is one of those cheap office plants that people would put in the corners back in the day, you know, and it was like those big green leaves, and it was fake, right? It was a fake plant. That's what came to mind. This smells nothing like that. This smells extremely natural. Do I get a leather note in this? I mean, maybe the outlines of a leather, but I can't say I really get a leather in this. Do I get much of a chypre note in this? not in the traditional chypres like I love, right? Um, Not in the traditional sheepers like I love. This is mostly for me kind of focusing on a couple notes. The Lily of the Valley is a star of the show. Those green notes, the basil and the galbanum, is another star of the show. And then maybe that patchouli in the base, I think, is the main star. But there is, it seems like a very simplistic fragrance, but it smells very complex. Like I said, imagine going to the botanical gardens and reading all of the nameplates of all the different plants that you maybe knew existed, but didn't know the names. And it's endless, how many you see there, right? Probably too many to visit them all in one day, right? That kind of thing. Is it mysterious and provocative? Yes. Is it bright and lush? I don't know about bright and lush. I think the green notes come across very crunchy, acrid, bitter, harsh. Um, Bitter's a good word for it, but it's contrasted with kind of the slightly musky sweetness of the Lily of the Valley. It's a beautiful fragrance. I mean, is this the type of fragrance that I would create if I was making my favorite fragrance? No, absolutely not. I will say that whenever I started to research what Frederic Malle was thinking, because honestly, Frederic Malle has me quite smitten with some of his scents. I've recently acquired vintage Bois de Rage and many Frederic Malles I've acquired recently, and I've been going for the vintage versions, and I've never been disappointed. Many of those vintage Malles are fantastic. Vintage L'Eau d'Hiver, before Estee Lauder took them over, is unbelievable. A Jean-Claude Elena masterpiece almost that very few people talk about. And I've been quite smitten with the House of Frederic Malle lately. And one fragrance that I mentioned earlier that he said he really studied when they made Synthetic Jungle is Private Collection. Now, this is the discontinued pure fragrance spray. And I will tell you, if you watch some of the videos that I have talked about this fragrance from the 70s, and oh my God, there is like this honeysuckle note in this. This is like green. This is one of the best green fragrances I've ever smelled. And honestly, whenever Frederic Malle said that this is one of the main fragrances that they studied, Private Collection, in creating Synthetic Jungle, I mean, I bet you I could sit down and talk perfume with Frederic Malle for hours, because everyone talks about Chanel No. 19, and rightly so. Chanel No. 19 is one of the greatest green fragrances of all time, maybe the greatest green fragrance of all time, but there is something about this that stole my heart. And if you actually watch when I unboxed this and talked about it, and in the coming weeks after I unboxed this, when this came out, I talked about how much I love, like how amazing this was, how struck I am. And if you know my love for Estee Lauder, you know that Azuré is one of my favorite chypres. There's a chypre for me. If I was going to make a chypre, it would be Azuré, vintage Azuré. That leather oak moss, I mean, punch you in the face, oak moss and leather of Azuré is right up my alley. That's a Bernard Champ masterpiece, something like Aramis, the original Aramis, that kind of thing, right? But the 70s were about these green fragrances, and it was so popular in the women's fragrance world, it started to seep into the men's fragrance world as well. And I think, there's a handful of green fragrances that to me are kind of in the green fragrance like pantheon, right? And number 19 is one. Private Collection is obviously another. And I've done a video on green fragrances. You can go check it out. This is not a top 10 green fragrances where we kind of go into some of my favorite green scents. But I have to say, and I don't say this lately, I've only worn this twice, but I would put this right up there with them as far as best green fragrances I've smelled go. And that's just, I get nothing out of this. I'm not saying this just, because, I mean, I got this tiny little decant from a friend. I don't even own a bottle. Would I buy a bottle is the question, though. That's a deeper question. That's a tougher question for me, because would I spend the $225 on 50 mil at retail, or would I spend the $330 for 100 mil? I don't know about that. I think I would stick to, honestly, I think I have 2 vintage bottles of number 19. I think I would wear those. Or I think I would wear my private collection, which I'm in love with right now. This pure fragrance spray is otherworldly. It is like, it almost makes me drool when I smell it. But the thing is this is very, very good. Um, I would venture to bet that if Frederic Malle was making these type of fragrances in the 70s and competing with, you know, stuff like this, that it would be, he would be right up there with them. Even now, I would put him in that, on that level. But you know, it's a fragrance category that I think kind of gets overlooked. This green category of fragrance, this green perfume category, and they really did it justice. I think Frederic Malle really did it justice, and shout out to them for creating this with all of the regulations, and all of the banning of materials and all of this stuff, right? And Filippo did a fantastic job. So that's my early impression. I mean, we kept it under half an hour. That's my goal with these early impressions. I honestly did not think I would like this as much as I did. This is a pure surprise for me, and a beautiful surprise. I think, thank you to the person who shared this with me. It's been a joy and an honor getting to know Synthetic Jungle. Do let me know what you think if you have experience with Synthetic Jungle. If you like it or hate it, or if you agree or disagree with me, I would love to hear your thoughts. Do leave a comment, like, subscriptions, all that stuff always helps out the channel. You know, we're constantly growing. We're constantly bringing more people who love fragrance to our little family, our little fragrance town, if you will. And you know, I'm gonna try to do some live streams very soon. I should mention, actually, we have a live stream already set for 6 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Central, on Friday, April the 7th. So Friday, April the 7th, Good Friday, at 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central. Tune in, because we're going to have John Beeble on from January Scent Project. Absolute honor to have him on the channel. Can't wait. Get your questions ready. Ask him all the great questions I know you guys have. So put that on the calendar. I hope you can be there. Thanks for watching, everyone. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.